Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Bayan Hassan, and I shall be moderating today's webinar. The topic is TPM, methodology for digitally empowered teams, where we will focus on chemical and pharma manufacturing. I would like to introduce today's speakers. Firstly, Hans-Jürgen Höhne, who has a PhD in chemical engineering and specialty chemicals consultant, and Ashbach, CEO, Tora. I will now hand over to Hans-Jürgen to say a few words.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Hans-Jürgen Höhne. I was engaged 30 years with Evonik, a global leading specialty company. I have a chemical engineering background and a PhD in this area. Well, I worked in a broad range of functions and responsibilities within Evonik. In the business function, I was responsible for global key account management for specialty chemicals. And during nearly 20 years, I was engaged in production and technology functions, where I gained experience in the production of automotive catalysts and chemical catalysts. Within my latest responsibility as a head of production and technology for the business line catalysts at Evonik, one of my major endeavors was the introduction of TPM in all plants of my area of responsibility, that was in Germany, in China and Japan, India, and the US. Especially one German plant was respected as a TPM reference plant within Evonik. And well, during this time, I gained experience about TPM and understand what makes TPM programs successful and what topics are mission critical. Currently, I'm self-employed as a consultant and certified business coach and practitioner of positive psychology and leadership. And I'm also an advisor to startups and offer to share my broad experience and knowledge in the area of TPM. Yeah, beside these engagements, I love to play golf and saxophone, but that wasn't topic today. Thank you.
Very good. And Hans-Jürgen, it's great to have you on board for this webinar. I'm really looking forward to the next 40 minutes or so. So first, from my side, the company Ashbach is a solution provider for plant process management. We make a software which is called Shift Connector. And in my role as Chief Operations Officer, I'm basically in charge of operating our value chain here at Ashbach. And I have a very strong focus on our business in Europe. And that's exactly where I am. I'm here in our headquarters in Bad Säckingen. So for those who probably don't know that, it's just 30 kilometers outside of Basel. So we are really in a chemical and pharma hub region, right? And this is also the industry we focus on. So intermediates, active ingredients, APIs, specialty chemicals. And this is an area where daily business was really impacted by the massive developments and changes over the past 3 years. Like, demand shifts due to COVID, the digitalization really taking off, supply chain challenges, and now also the upcoming energy crisis, right? Yeah, our customers come from all over the world, mainly from Europe and the States. And this is also where we have our US entity office in Boston in the United States. Briefly about myself, education-wise, I studied business administration. I had a strong focus on design and innovation in software throughout my career. And I really enjoy the plant process management space because at the end of the day, it's about bringing people together. And it's about bringing the essential workers in a manufacturing plant together. And that's also especially true for the topic of TPM. So I'd say, let's get started. And with that, back to you, Bayan.
Thank you for the brief introduction. Before we start with our agenda, let me cover the housekeeping rules. If during the presentation you have any question, please write these in the Q&A section below. And Hans-Jürgen and Veit will answer these at the end of our webinar. Also, the session is being recorded and a link will be sent out to all attendees afterward. With this, I'll hand it over to you, Hans. Sorry.
Yes, Brian, thank you very much for the introduction. Yeah, I would like to guide you a little bit through the agenda. What is the topic of today? Yeah, first of all, I would like to point out what is TPM and what is the meaning and the importance of TPM in the VUCA world. Especially, I would like to share then topics how to introduce TPM successfully and sustainable. We'll share some insights in how TPM successfully works, yeah. Share some key learnings and also have an outlook and role of TPM in Industry 5.0. Well, and all in between the major enabler for a successful TPM program is a good communication between all involved people in the plant and in the supporting functions. So Veit will give then some more details and examples for that. Yeah, what is TPM? I mean, first of all, TPM is not a project. It's not a project with where you start and end. TPM is a program which is in continuous program and philosophy guiding the plant operations. And yeah, maybe it goes also beyond the plans in the business areas also, but that depends on the situation. Well, basically TPM maximizes the asset effectiveness throughout the entire life cycle of the assets. Yeah. Well, it includes basically a set of methodologies, and it is the key point, however, is the work in cross-functional teams and really including lean activities, attacking every loss, and also establishing loss prevention systems. You see on the right-hand side, we call it basically a house of TPM. So you see the pillars which basically summarize all the methodologies, and that is as you can see, it is autonomous maintenance, focused improvements, plant maintenance, quality maintenance, training, office TPM, and in the world of sustainability topics, very important, also safety, health, and environmental aspects. So today, for sure, we will not cover all pillars, but we cover the main points where it's decisive to run successful TPM, and that is the basis. The basis of the house is a so-called 5S workplace organization, the 5S program. And I would like to share on the next slide then first of all, how the TPM program fits into the VUCA world. So VUCA, what does it mean? Well, it's a current time where you have lots of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and exactly this is where you can achieve with a right leadership and management and of TPM. You can establish a vision. Where do you want to go? Where you want to go? So that gives an understanding for everybody in the teams, and it also gives a clarity. What is the right process? What do you want to achieve? But also, with working in the teams, it ensures also agility, meaning, yeah, that is a world of change, and you need always to adapt, but you need to have good processes to basically ensure that it's successful. Yeah, basically, yeah, I call it also, it's a part of democracy in the production environment, and it involves the operators, because this is a key part. So there's lots of knowledge of the equipment with the operators who know their equipment best, and they are very close, and they spend much more time on the shop floor than anybody else from engineering groups or maintenance group. They see what's going on, and the key point is really to engage everybody, and also give pride to them, and increase the commitment to the whole goals of the respective production area. Yeah, basically, if you will, TPM is a kind of you heard about new work, and it's basically TPM is basically part of the new work in the production arena. Yeah. So in the next slide, as I mentioned, how to start now TPM successfully and sustainable. This is a 5S program, and 5S, well, this is known to the Japanese pupil in the elementary school, and this also applies here in the production areas to start with. So first of all, you look in the production areas and you remove everything which is not used. Yeah, that is a sort process. Then you set everything in order, a place for everything in its place. This is very important to, for example, put markings on the floor, and set your tools in the place where you need them. And so this is a very important step. And then for sure, also shine. Yeah, the plant should be look nice, but not for the sake of looking nice. It's for sure also to detect very early any deviations of the equipment, and when it's dirty, you can't realize that, and that helps. And for sure, it's also nice and gives a good environment and a good feeling for the humans, for the operators in their workplace. Yeah, and number 4 is standardize. Yeah, so it's not a one-time effect that you sort, set in order, and shine, and then it's running by itself. No, you need to standardize these processes. You need to sustain it, and that's basically an ongoing process. And the important point here is that you keep it running all time. So, but even before you start the TPM, you need to motivate the team for the change. And that is a very nice equation. It has also a name, it's a formula. So you first, as a plant management, you need to explain what the unwanted situation of the plant is. Is it high losses? Is it high cost? Is it higher accident rate? Is it the leadership needs to explain that. Then you need also have a clear vision. Where do you want to go? You want to have a growth story to present. Where you want to go, and this you need to present to everybody very clearly. And then to be successful, you need a method, and that's, in our case, it's TPM. But this is a general rule for successful change management, and I guarantee you, if you don't have one of these factors, it will become zero. It will not be successful. Yeah. And again, I mentioned that maybe too often, but leadership is always the key for the success. Yeah. Well, I mentioned the starting points with the 5S, and then is also a very important point to motivate is basically also you cross audit the areas and establish some, let's say, nice and sportive competition between the shifts to get better together. Yeah. And yeah, how do you do that? And there a good software tool comes into place that you establish a meaningful checklist when you do, and standardize it and sustain it. So and Veit will give you some insight how that works with the shift connector.
Absolutely, and I mean, you mean standardizing, and that's obviously something you can do very good with a software solution. But it's also about an easy start. And say you introduce this TPM program, and you show up. You start with 5S, and you show up with Excel spreadsheets, or you show up with paper forms, and say, well, this is our new approach now. That's probably not what you want in today's day and age. So there can be an easy start, and it can be easy in digital as well. So Just to give an example, I want to show you the Shift Connector Go mobile app. It runs on any mobile device, including ATEX devices or maybe even cleanroom devices, and allows you to easily create your own 5S checklists in a true self-service mode, right? So what you can see here on the screen is a list of operator rounds, and and there's a schedule behind each checklist. And one of them is my weekly 5S cleaning checklist, which is due for execution. So let's assume I'm now an outside operator. I'm executing the weekly inspection and I'm confirming my checkpoints here, which I have one by one. But in one situation, oh wait, there's a leak, right? So the app asks me to describe the problem. So I can input some text, but also the app asks me to really not only add a description, but also add a photo to the description. So if I'm now on the shop floor outside, I can do that right away. I have here my equipment, my reactor. I have here the leaking portion. I'm taking that photo right with my smartphone. And this is how I can execute a checklist. Now the trick is that checklist is connected. So the response will not only show up on your smartphone, it will also show up in the control room once you've executed that checklist. And it can become, for example, automatically part of your shift records. And then also with your shift handover, it can go into this as well. So this is just an easy example of a checklist. There's much more complexity you can add to these checklists if you want. For example, if you want to take readings with high-low input validation and so on, you can all do this, but we are focusing on an easy start. But back from software, Hans-Jürgen, to you.
Yes, maybe you remember the first pillars is focused improvements. So what kind of focused improvements can be done and will happen to my experience? I mean, first of all, from the 5S activities, operators bring up already lots of projects coming up in their mind, what needs to be improved, and they get the feeling, okay, they can change something. And well, also, let's say with the 5S checklist, they also get clearly a picture how much time they really spend for cleaning. And well, it's the target of TPM and the 5S is not to become a world champion in cleaning. Yeah, it's basically to reduce cleaning times by smart solutions. And the experience was that this will happen. So that is basically the first projects resulting from 5S activities to come up with nice technical solutions to reduce, for example, a cleaning time. Another very important method which results in focused improvements is the application, and most of you have probably heard the OEE, and OEE is basically a target to eliminate losses in relation to downtime, efficiency, and quality. And also this fight can be very nicely supported by the Shift Connector software, right?
Absolutely, and let's really go there and see what this could be, how this could look. And let's do it with a quick demo. And what we will do is we will go through a real user journey on collecting data for OEE and for the purpose of improvement. So let's assume we are on night shift in a control room of a batch manufacturing plant. What we see here is we have Shift Connector open in the browser, Google Chrome in that case. And in the application, we have what we call the OEE accounting tab, right? What I can see on the left-hand side is I can see a range of units, for example, reaction units, and we have batches. These are the areas shown in green. These batches have been produced within target time. We have batches in red, those have exceeded the target time. They didn't hold up the actual process. And batches in orange color, they are the actual problem. They had an impact on the process. And when we select this batch, we can see that it had a total cycle time deviation of 16 hours. And we can also see a list of operations where very obviously the D425A is the issue in that list of operations here. Now this data is this is process data. It's imported typically from a historian server like Pi or IP21. And now as a practitioner on night shift, I select the production loss and I will get a form, and that form is asking the operator on shift to put in all the information he has or she has about the incidents, right? So we will add all the information which we have. We say it's a problem with tank levels. I'm selecting that from a reason tree. And maybe the problem was that the holding tank was running empty because another unit in the process had a downtime, right? So I'm selecting that tank here for my list of functional locations. And I can then also, add the explanation. I'm just pasting that from the clipboard. And I'm also escalating this to be discussed in the morning meeting, so my team knows what happened. I can go further. I could attach a SAPPN notification. And in that case, I'm just saving that record. It's now part of my shift documentation. It's part of the documentation which will be available to my team, to my shift teams, to understand the process and what happened. Now, say you have a process engineer on your day shift team and you want to help him improve the process. You will really like this. You can switch timeframes, you can drill down into units, you can look at process control charts, and there you can see the outliers, which we have been recorded, and there exactly is the D425A outlier, which we accounted before, right? So that's an, let's say, very individual approach. So we are recording losses on night shift. We have single losses, which we can review, for example, in a process control chart. But let's say you want to see also more aggregated data. And obviously, once you started collecting data, you can aggregate it and you can use it to, start your improvement initiatives. So let's say you want to do your 5Y analysis, then this dashboard here is a good starting point, right? It really aggregates the collected data, and it gives you obviously the OEE KPI for a selected time frame. So that tells you, how am I doing? What is my progress also with improvement of my whole TPM program? But it also accumulates a lot of other information for, let's say, your production time from a selected time frame. It gives you a whole OEE loss cascade. That could be anything depending on really what you have defined in your organization, how you track OEE. And it also gives you an aggregated view of the bad actors and the reason codes, right, which have been selected. So in my example, I'm selecting the rotating equipment, and you can really filter it down. You can drill down to the single loss event, right? And what is important here, and I mentioned that earlier, is transparency. Every shop floor employee who has access to the software, and he should have access to the software, can access this data, because then everyone can take ownership, everyone understands what is happening in the process, and everyone can use this to, drive an improvement initiative. And this is again the practical part. So initiatives and OEE improvement. Hans-Jürgen, I guess you had some success in that area as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So on the next slide, basically, I can review that the OEE is really a very strong tool, and it's a tool for communication, for identifying the losses, and basically also taking the right action. And so this will be in every plant. I think it's an ongoing process, and with the software. So this is already, I would say, Premier League. It's Bundesliga, yeah. So, but the next step, I would call it, maybe you go to Champions League. Yeah, so this is when you really look at the data and assume that might be the other things are under control. Then you can have a look in lots of situations. New product, a new recipe is introduced in the plant, and then you find the best demonstrated practice for a certain product. But if you have also, and when you have the good analysis, you can then even optimize recipes together with the process developments and R&D departments to see, for example, is a heating up time or a cooling time that is a major time-consuming process. And maybe lots of people joining the webinar today, sometimes, R&D throws something over the fence and production needs to keep it. And so you can start, based on these data, key process improvement steps where possible. Yeah, so, and that is basically then a step-by-step process. And this is basically on top of the optimization of, let's say, the common production losses of equipment and other things. How to run successfully TPM at work. So as I mentioned already, it's very good to have quarterly audits of areas, not only in respective, let's say, in relation to 5S, but there it's a good possibility to run cross-functional audit teams. And see what level you reach compared to your standard. Yeah, and well, results what we experienced. I mean, for sure, we could reduce cleaning times by, in some cases, for example, dust sources, which cause a lot of time for cleaning, by 50%. We got positive customer feedback because the plant looks very clean and in order, and that is a very good situation. Then also safety standards in all TPM plants who are committed to TPM also have a great benefit. And we could also observe that the number of continuous improvement ideas increased significantly, and it results in significant cost savings also. And also very nice benefit was also to train people in basically work on very detailed CIP, continuous improvement ideas, and not just only mentioning, oh, I have a idea that could be done, but also really start to develop ideas in a pretty detailed way already. In the next slide, we summarize a little bit the key learnings. Yeah, so I mean, well, maybe it's nothing new, but especially for TPM, it's very important that you really walk the talk, that TPM becomes really a priority in the mind of the leaders. Yeah, so it's not, oh, there is a TPM meeting, a steering meeting, and okay, leadership is not showing up. So this is a no-go, and this will not help to push the TPM process. Yeah, and then also we mentioned improvement teams, or let's say teams working on special projects, operators. Yeah, and they are not used to give presentations about their projects, and when they do, they really need support and appreciation to these presentations. Yeah, communication is always a key, open and trustful communication, and complete communication within the organization between the shifts and so on. Yeah, so this is a very important point. And when we started in some plants where we had, let's say, I wouldn't call it, it was not really a competition. It was, okay, on shift 1 we do it this way, and on shift 2 we do it this way. And when shift change was, so maybe some parameters were even adjusted. Yeah, so that is absolutely not helpful, and you need to implement the philosophy, one team, one goal, and it doesn't matter where a great idea comes from. It needs to be ensured that the best idea is applied throughout the whole organization. Yes, and the key point also, as I mentioned, communication is really a comprehensive information flow, which I really see as a key enabler for TPM.
Perfect, and that's the transition to maybe I call it reality check, to really look at the information flow and understand how is that actually going in a typical chemical or pharmaceutical manufacturing plant. And most manufacturing teams in chemical and pharma, they work in around the clock, 24-hour operations. And in this environment, communication and collaboration is critical, but especially difficult. So what's the actual reality there in shift operations? Let's look at the complexity really here. And typically we see 3 shifts a day, 5 shift teams. So these are board operators, outside operators, shift supervisors, and so on. We also do have a day shift. They are typically there from 8 a.m. in the morning, which means they don't see anyone from the night shift. Now, in the typical process plant, there's a range of, let's say, standard tools involved, standard solutions involved, which is you have a place for your process data. We mentioned IP21 or the OSI of Pi system, where you have, your batch data, your process data in. You have a CMMS system, so maintenance management system is typically something like SAP PM, for example, an ERP system, a LIMS system. All these systems are involved, right? And people now have to collaborate to run an even manufacturing process and fix any upsets. Most importantly, care for their safety as well. So we have an extensive information flow, which is taking place every shift, right? And what we have to facilitate this is we have shift handovers. All the information from the outgoing shift is transferred to the incoming shift. It's a process which typically takes 15 minutes. And in this time frame, the entire plant will be handed over from one shift team to the next shift team. So there's also very limited time and room for communication between those teams. So what people actually do is they try to help themselves. They do it with their own tools. And typically what we observe is there's really a zoo, an entire zoo of Excel spreadsheets, of paper, of email, of hand-grown tools. And they're using these tools to track what is the status of my safety critical tasks? What are current responses to DCS alarms? What are my open tasks? What is my unfinished work? Temporary work instructions or deviations from the standard operating procedures. The status of a process order completion, all these things. That happens and day in and day out, and every year, more than 1,000 times a year, they're doing these handovers with, let's say, very often a very complicated set of tools which they use for communication. The same applies for the morning meeting, right? Where also with the morning meeting, they're using these little helpers to escalate information to the morning meeting. So if you want your teams to really take ownership for your production, as it's, should be in TPM, if you want your people to work together to run an even process safely without any upsets, then you really need to care for their communication and also for the digital solution behind their communication. At the end, we do this to run an even process. And let's look for a moment at Shift Connector as a platform in its entirety and what Shift Connector actually does. Shift Connector is, as I said at the beginning, it's a plant process management platforms, and it's there to connect the brains of your operator teams, if you will, right? So it connects people among each other, but also people and systems like historian systems, maintenance systems, and so on. And it gives your operator teams a single source of truth It gives them all the information about what is happening in my manufacturing operation at my plant. It's also, and I said that, ready to become really part of your strategic solution landscape because it easily integrates with other mission critical systems, for example, SAP PM or your historians. And to me, it's really the digital counterpart when you introduce a TPM program, because it really creates that transparency, which Hans-Jürgen, you mentioned throughout your teams, right? It's self-service. It democratizes your approach because the plant can do self-service configurations. We saw that with checklists. People at the plant can create them themselves, right? It lets you track performance, such as OEE, and you can run the reports on it. And most importantly, it puts the people at the center. It really helps the people to communicate and helps them to make the right decisions. So in that sense, it's a true Industry 5.0 application. And with that, I would say back to you and about Industry 5.0, Hans-Jürgen.
Well, exactly. Thanks, Veit. So actually, the European Commission, they launched a program about Industry 5.0. And actually, Industry 5.0 provides, let's say, a vision of industry that aims beyond efficiency and productivity. And that's where basically TPM fits very well in. And basically, yes, it reinforces also the role and the contribution of industry to society. Yeah, it's human-centric, and it places the well-being of the workers in the center of the production process, and it uses beyond the Industry 4.0, uses new technology to provide prosperity beyond jobs and growth, and while basically respecting the limits, the production limits of the planet overall. And you see also other aspects in Industry 5.0 pointing out sustainability, which comes into the forefront. And as you know, during the recent crisis, it is very important to also be resilient to the major changes which happen in the VUCA world, but also on our planet right now, which needs responses in all areas like resilient supply chains and also on the production area in all respective areas.
So, well, thank you, Hans-Jürgen, and thank you, Veit, for all the valuable information you have shared with us today. And for anyone who joined late, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function below. I will now go through the questions we have already received from the audience. Let me pick out a random question. How long does it take to introduce TPM successfully?
I think that's one for Hans-Jürgen.
Yeah, well, I mean, you need to be patient with the TPM. As I mentioned, it's not, let's say, a project, it's a program. And to my understanding and to my experience, what we see in the plans, yeah, it is 1 to 2 years when you start basically from, I wouldn't say zero, you have maybe a continuous improvement program in place. But if you really keep the process running, it's 1 to 2 years, I would say. Yeah. And also, this might be also a very important hint. We tried in some of the plans that the program is basically managed by the plant managers themselves.
I think this question is for you, Veit. People don't like change. What is your experience regarding the acceptance of a new tool like Shift Connector?
That's a good one. Totally agree. I think the recipe behind introducing Shift Connector, and I think it's really in the true sense of TPM, is you wanna have people participating in the change, right? You wanna involve them very early on. So what we typically do when we introduce Shift Connector to any manufacturing plant, to any organization, we really ask them to participate in the first workshops from the very beginning. We are reviewing, for example, their existing work processes, their existing documents, how they are working together. And we make them an owner of the new setup with Shift Connector, right? So they get a say in how the solution is configured, and it will be their solution at the end of the day. With that being said, we still have something what we call global standards, because Shift Connector really is an enterprise solution, and you can have standardization on a global level, on the enterprise level, but still allow the plants the flexibility so they can really have their own setup, have their local specific language, have their local specific forms, and adhere to maybe local specific laws when we talk about shift handover, for example.
Thank you, Veit. Another question we have is, what is the difference between TPM and ODM, operators-driven maintenance?
Well, I can answer that. I mean, basically, as I mentioned, the plant maintenance, all the maintenance issues are also, as you've seen in the pillars, are also part of TPM. So plant maintenance and focused maintenance is a part of the TPM process. And also for that, there are special methodologies, basically also starting with downtime analysis, but it goes beyond. It goes then also training of operators to perform small maintenance tasks. And this is also very important, which increases the commitment of the operators and also helps reducing costs, because then small repairs could be done immediately without getting somebody in the night shift during night, for example, in. And so the response times for small repairs are very much reduced.
Okay, thank you, Hans-Jürgen. I have another question. What happens if you introduce the Shift Connector in an organization that does not have yet experience with TPM or a similar program? Is it effective at all?
I like that question very much. And at the end of the day, they are perfect counterparts, right? You have the brainware, the methodology of TPM, you have software like Shift Connector, but it's not necessarily tied together, because Shift Connector is really what we call an Industry 5.0 application. It puts people at the center, it puts communication processes at the center, and it doesn't require a TPM program per se. It can be nice to hook up a Shift Connector implementation with such a program, because then you immediately have a lot of guidance and you can drive the process forward. But the communication situation which we described with the shift organization, the 24-hour operations, the need to track manufacturing performance with things like OEE, that's always there. And typically we get a very positive response, independent from whether you have TPM as a program or not, from the plant level, how much it really helps their daily communication and how much they could retire a range of, let's say, paper documentation, Excel, and so on, and really have a smooth communication through that, single source of truth in Shift Connector.
Thank you, Veit. And another question is, how important is accountability in a TPM project?
Could you repeat that again, please?
Yes. How important is accountability in a TPM project?
Yes, it's very important. I mean, it's very important. And as I mentioned, from the leadership, but also, let's say you will have, let's say, for small focused improvement projects, you will have certain people standing up and say, okay, I will lead this project, and then this person is also accountable to implement an improvement by communicating with the other shifts and getting all the information together, and also guide a team to achieve these improvements and implement them. Yeah.
And I think what is really tied to the question, Hans-Jürgen, is also, when you talk about accountability, it's also empowerment.
Absolutely.
When we talk about TPM, that's one part, but it also has to do with, you mentioned the democratization on the shop floor. We mentioned like the full transparent communication. And when using TPM, but also when using Shift Connector, using both in pairs, you really bring each operator out of the shadow. That's what we like to say, right? So everyone can help, everyone has all the information, everyone can give information to the teams, can give information to the morning meetings. So I think it comes with both. It comes with accountability, but also with empowerment.
Okay, thank you. And another question is, what is the financial benefit of TPM content that is empowering the employees, such as 5S?
Well, I mean, basically, I mean, the financial benefit, I mean, it depends on the plans, but in lots of companies, you have, for example, a CIP program, which financially honors the ideas, the continuous improvement ideas brought up by people in the plant. Yeah, and within TPM, and that you need to discuss in every case with also the workers council, is that, for example, that is a very, let's say, advanced way, that basically all the teams agree that during the course of the year, all financial benefits will be shared to a certain extent and given to everybody in the plant. That is a very, let's say, advanced level, ensuring also the team spirit. Yeah, it is not important on the long run if it's from Mr. Müller or Ms. Schulz, the idea. It's a team effort, and that is one way to do it. I mean, financial benefit of 5S as such that's a basis, and I think the benefit results in the improvement ideas, which are then also implemented and shown.
Like the many questions we get here. Wow.
Okay, thank you. And another question is, let's take this one. What was your greatest challenge when introducing TPM?
Well, the greatest challenge, maybe I mentioned that already. We were very optimistic in doing that with, let's say, with the actual plant management in place. Yeah, and then we learned, okay, it's a task which goes much and needs more time and training. I mean, that was and the achievement was basically to install a coordinator, TPM coordinator. And well, also what a very nice achievement to see really how operators' mindset changed, and then you really yeah, you advance. For example, yes, there will be production pressure that you need to do it and bring out the products in the right time and right quality, and then people come and complain that they cannot work on their improvement projects. And if you achieve this status, I think then you know that TPM is working in your plant.
Thank you, Hans-Jürgen. Let's take one final question. Does your Shift Connector tool support Chinese language?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, it does. And in general, Shift Connector is an application which is globally used by most of our customers, and it supports at the moment more than 21 languages, and we have traditional and simplified Chinese as part of our language packs.
Okay, Thank you so much, Hans-Jürgen, and thank you so much, Veit, for all the information you've shared with us today. With this, I think we can now conclude today's webinar, and we will send out the link by email to all the attendees. And thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Veit or Hans-Jürgen or myself. And thank you so much and have a great day.
And also from my side, really thank you to all the participants. Thank you so much for Hans-Jürgen to join us with all your broad experience in TPM. Thank you, Bayern, for moderating. It was a pleasure.